How to play the turn after calling flop check raise. This is the last line we're going to cover here in our PFR Synchronous Pot in Position series. This video is going to be much shorter than the previous ones because, as you can see here on your screen, I don't have a lot of data for this line. I'll have to come back here in a few weeks and update this video once I run more data for this line. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging, and I wanted to cover this line with the data that I have here, and then in a few weeks I can come back and produce a new video with more data for you guys. Okay, so the idea of this line here is, again, bet sizing heuristics and hand class frequency heuristics for you guys. After we call the flop check raise and villain checks to us, we're going to have a pretty common line to stab small here. You've probably seen this before if you study with solvers. You see here that the most frequently used sizing for us is the small size. Now, the idea here is really simple, 2/3 of the time. So 2/3 of the time, we're going to be using the small size. So if you just use the small size, you're going to be correct 2/3 of the time. So the idea here is really simple. After villain check raises the flop, which he should do a lot of the time with the polarized range, sometimes with a depolar range, but most of the time with the polarized range. And then he checks the turn. Basically, his range contains a lot of air. In our range, since we back called the flop, we don't have much air anymore, right? So it's a combination of villain having air, us having a lot of middling hands and not much air at all. The combination of this equity distribution matchup, as I like to call it, ends up being a small bet high frequency, or a small bet mostly for us in position. Because we have middling hands, very little air, villain has a bunch of air, we're just betting to get those airs to fold. Okay, so basically that's the idea here. We see that 2/3 of the time we're going to use the small size, and there are some runouts where we're going to use the 2/3 size. The other sizes practically inexistent in our strategy. So let's just figure out some bet sizing heuristics for when to size up, and then in every other board texture we're going to size down. So let's take a look at this and see if we can find any patterns on which runouts we should be sizing up. We can see here some, it seems to me, runouts where there's basically quite a lot of draws available. At least that's the pattern that I can see quickly by looking at these runouts. So 10-6-3, then turn comes a double flush draw, comes an overcard, making an open-ended available, a 9 making open-ended available, a 9 double flush draw, an 8 here, that's curious when the flush completes, that we're using the 2/3 sizing, a blank here on 10-deuce-deuce, jack of clubs on 10-6-3, making a lot of draws available, 9 of clubs, 7 of clubs. So it seems to me it's a lot about being a board texture that offers a lot of draws. At least that's the loose pattern that I can pick up by taking a look at these runouts. So since we have little data, let's call it that. Let's call it that on runouts that have lots of draws available, and basically runouts where, like, you don't gain much by, you know, betting a 10 here, right? On 10-6-3 king. You don't gain much by betting pocket 9s here. The same on 10-5-deuce-9. You don't gain much by betting pocket 7s here, pocket 8s, a 5, right? You still have the threat of getting check raised by your opponent. So let's say that on the runouts that there are a lot of draws available and your middling hands not necessarily want to put money into the pot, you size up, everything else you size down. Now let's see very quickly some hand class frequency heuristics. Again, the data here is not very big. It's in fact very small, so I don't want to go too in depth here, but I still want to give you guys a few insights, a few numbers, because of course this is a relevant line to your game plan post flop. As always, like, we're going to cover the hand classes that are most relevant to us, and I always like to start with the top 2 pair because we have the pillar of G2 strategy that you should slow play the top of your range. And as you guys have been seeing, this is true in almost any situation, right? Pretty much all the spots we've seen so far, with the exception, I think, flop C betting on high card rainbow boards. We're just pure betting most of those boards, so we're not slow playing much. But in every other line or circumstance, we are slow playing at least 25-20% of the top of our range. All right, so let's take a look at 2 pair plus here on this line. We see similar pattern here. 200 hands, I guess a decent sample actually. 200 hands, we have here 75% bet, 25% check. So let's note that down here. So hand class frequency heuristic for 2-pair plus, we are going to put it into the 80-20, 80% bucket for the 2-pair plus. Okay, you're gonna slow play 20% of your 2-pair plus. Another hand class that is relevant to us in the context of being balanced has to do with another pillar of GTO strategy, which is to mix it up with the draws. You can't always fast play your draws, otherwise you're going to be imbalanced. Take a look at that. 60-40 with the draws. You got to mix it up with the draws, guys. I have been telling you this on all lines I've been seeing here. You can't just bet all of your draws. You have to check some of your draws. So you're going to see here some examples. It feels like you should always bet it, but you shouldn't. 10-8 of diamonds here. Feels like a really good hand to bet, right? But you shouldn't bet all the time. The flush draw here on a pairing card is understandable. Look at the queen jack. The queen jack of hearts here feels like a super good barrel, but we should be checking. Ace 8 of diamonds here. Jack 9 off, open-ended straight draw, and we're still checking some of the time here. So you can see that betting with your draws is not something you should do 100% of the time. Queen 8 here with the double gutter. We're checking it back and then bluffing the river. So as you can see, 60-40, 60% bucket for the draws here. You have to mix it up with your draws to be balanced in the spot. Next, what would be another relevant hand class here? I guess another relevant hand class would be the top pairs. So top pair, good kicker, and over pairs, 60% bucket for those. Top pair, good kicker, over pair, relatively tight, relatively passive strategy here with top pair and over pair. You can see here 60% bucket. Okay, 60% bucket for those hands. You're going to have to check sometimes, well, decent amount of time with those top pair good kicker. Take a look at that. You call the flop check raise on 10-5 deuce. Villain checks the turn. You don't always take a stab here. You don't always take a stab. You're going to have quite a lot of ace highs checking here, right? Some ace king, ace queens, even ace jacks that you're going to bet call the flop with. You're going to have quite a lot of bluff catches like 5x and deuce x. So if you just always bet your top pair plus, you're severely imbalanced by the river, right? This creates this takes you out of the equilibrium. If you want to get to an equilibrium, you have to check 40% of your top pair, good kickers and over pairs in the spot. Then you can obviously value bet the river if the action goes check, check. Pocket kings here on a pairing board, you're checking. This one is understandable. Pocket aces, take a look at this one. Pocket aces, we bet call the flop. Turn comes a king. You don't always bet your pocket aces here. You check it sometimes. This might sound surprising to you, huh? Pocket aces here. Take a look at that. We bet call the flop. Turn comes a blank. We don't always bet with pocket aces here. We check it sometimes. We're supposed to check top pair, good kicker, and over pairs 40% of the time. Only 60% bucket for these hands, guys. Take a look at how much checking we need to do in this spot. Another hand class that is relevant to us here is going to be the air region. Well, we're not going to have much air here. Let's talk about ace highs. Let's talk about ace highs. Our ace highs are mostly checking, so ace highs are put into the 40% bucket. So 40% bucket for our ace highs. I'm actually interested in taking a look at the ones that we are betting. I guess those are mostly going to be low kicker, medium kicker, ace highs with some kind of blocker. Take a look at that. Ace jack taking a stab here. Not super intuitive, right? Not super intuitive that you would want to take a stab with ace jack here. Same idea here. Take a look. A little stab on the double paired board. A7 stabbing on the pair board. So it seems like a lot of stabs on the pair boards. Ace deuce here, just straight up bluffing. A6. This one is very interesting. This one is very interesting. Villain clicks the flop. This is a thing. This is a thing in GTO, okay? To have a click range in paired, high card paired boards out of position. We're going to talk about that in the how to play single ace pot OP as caller. Ace king here, double paired, taking a stab into this very air heavy range. So very interesting, very interesting. We should be taking quite a lot of stabs with those ace highs, which are not necessarily super intuitive. So I'm glad I covered this hand class, because I know now that you're probably thinking, what the fuck is Solver doing here, right? Why is Solver betting so many of these ace highs? Well, yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing to be betting those ace highs right there on the turn about 40% of the time. So 40% bucket for your ace highs. Don't ask me why. Well, it's understandable why, right? Your ace highs are a decent portion of your back call flop range. If you just check back with all of your ace highs behind, that's going to make you exploitable. So the answer to any question of why Solver does this, the answer is always Solver becomes exploitable if it doesn't do this. That's the answer. And then you can think of, okay, how it becomes exploitable. Then it's another question. But the answer is always Solver does this because it would be exploitable. It would be exploitable if it didn't. In the case of these combinations, it basically just would make the checking range way too weak, way too concentrated on those weak bluff catchers. Awesome. So lastly, I think we should cover middle pairs, because this is a region that also may not be necessarily too intuitive here. And we can see that middle pairs are being put into the 40% bucket. These ones may also cause some confusion when we see the solver betting with them. Queen Jack here taking a stab when it gets counterfeited. Pocket ace, this one makes quite a lot of sense, right? Because it's a super dry board. The turn pairs the board, which means that the out of turn player is going to have a huge, very air heavy range, and that you can get those overcards to fold. So it's awesome for pocket eights to get a hand like Queen 5 suited to fold, you know, King 4 suited to fold. So really, really nice with the pocket eights here. Same idea here on the turn. Ace 6, just getting that stab to get rid of that air. Ace Jack, same stuff. So quite a lot of stabs with the middle pair region to be able to leverage, of course, the fact that our range is strong on the turn. Our opponent's range contains quite a lot of air, and therefore we're going to get a fold very often. Of course, we still have the threat of getting raised like this. Exploitatively, though, this course is not about exploits, but I can tell you that population does not check raise enough here. So these small stabs with middling hands is actually quite a profitable strategy, because your opponents are not going to do this that the PO big blind is doing here to check raise enough with this region of hands. Okay, so it's actually a very profitable exploit to overstab in this case. Ace 8 here, we're taking that stab. 10-9, we're taking that stab here. Really nice. That's a thin value bound the river. And then it has to fold against a check raise. So really cool, guys. I told you guys that this video would be much shorter than the others, but I think we covered quite nicely here as a starting point for you guys to have a game plan for the spot. You're going to use the 30% size most of the time. The only exceptions are some very draw heavy runouts where you can size up to 2/3. Mostly double flush draw boards, low boards with open-endeds available, and some other flush draw textures. Okay, and then the hand class frequency heuristics, we see that the pillar of GTO strategy, slow play top of range, is again present here. We're going to put the 2-pair plus in the 80% bucket, meaning we're going to slow play 20% of the time. The draws, another pillar of GTO strategy. We have to mix it up with the draws. We can't always bet our draws. We're checking 40% of the time with our draws here. And I'm talking, again, strong draws, open-endeds, and flush draws. Top pair, good kicker, and over pairs are also playing somewhat passively, checking behind 40% of the time. This is important for you to keep your checking range balanced. Your ace highs, counterintuitively, are stabbing here quite a lot, 40% of the time. Quite a lot of ace highs taking a stab right there on the turn, which is one of the hand classes that are probably the most non-intuitive about this node here. You have to stab with your ace highs 40% of the time. And your middle pairs, especially on those runouts where they're going to be using those small size, they're going to greatly benefit from getting your opponent's air to fold, so they're also present in the betting range here in the 40% bucket. So let's just finish with putting here player bets and showing you guys the range composition. So here you have the range composition, quite a dipolar range composition, right? You can see that he has all the hand classes at reasonable frequency. Of course, we have the strong hands, but we also have top pair good kicker, top pair weak kicker, middle pair, low pockets, a bunch of the draws, a bunch of the trash. So a very dipolar range construction. This is it for this video. I see you in the next one.